you're the CEO of a consumer products company or a computer company, and you get accused of the things that the Journal alleges that Steve Wynn has done. Maybe you can be fired, but you don't have to worry about some regulatory agency stealing your license or taking your license, from the very business that you run and ruining the business model. What is the risk here, and what would happen if indeed that were the case?
Yeah, well, the way we're looking at it, there's three factors that we're looking at that can influence the stock price of Wynn Resorts. One of them is the gaming licenses, which, of course, the regulatory authority boards have the right and are investigating the suitability of Steve Wynn. It is our view that corporate boards would look to exonerate any individual that has potential to negatively impact shareholder value. So we actually think there's a low risk that any of the current existing licenses that Wynn Resorts has gets removed. But other things that we're looking at would be the design quality and the future of that for Wynn Resorts. That's an important differentiator for the company and has been. We do think that there's limited risk there too. But the third thing is the brand reputation and what happens with any potential fallback. And we don't know what the outcome of this.
Dan, this is not one woman. This is many, many, many people. Is there any way Steve Wynn survives this? And if not, what is the succession plan for Wynn Resorts?
Yeah, these are serious allegations. It's not proper for me to comment on exactly what happens. But to your point, there's been a lot of people bringing up the misconduct allegations. If Steve Wynn were to be removed, it is our view that in that situation, the licenses most likely would be kept. But there is a risk to the brand.
Apple is telling suppliers that it will slash its iPhone X production target for the first quarter by half to 20 million units. Now, that is according to the Nikkei, which did not cite sources in that report. The Japanese paper, though, blaming weaker than expected sales results during the holiday season. Now, this follows a similar downbeat note from JP Morgan. Remember, analysts there recently said they were also picking up signs of weakening 10 orders. And just today, Bernstein's Tony Sacconaghi lowering his total iPhone unit estimates for the March quarter to 53 million. That's versus a consensus estimate of 62 million. But importantly, he expects Apple to maintain strong pricing power. She raised the average selling price to $767.
Where we're getting reports from NBC News that the FBI's deputy director, Andrew McCabe, has stepped down officially as of today. McCabe had been a frequent target of criticism by President Trump, who was skeptical of the FBI's role in the Russia investigation. McCabe had said that he would be likely to step down as early as March. This appears to be a stepped-up timetable for that resignation. NBC News reporting that McCabe will remain on the FBI's payroll on terminal leave until he's eligible to retire with full benefits later in March. The president began working on this State of the Union speech back in December, so there's been a lot of prep time here going into the speech that he'll deliver at 9 o'clock tonight. This afternoon, he's been meeting with some of the major television anchors, and we're also told that he'll meet inside the White House with some of the guests who will be in the First Lady's box here. Some of those people will be called out in some of those emotional moments that we're expecting tonight in the State of the Union as well. So what topics will the president be discussing? The White House has put out a quick list here, including jobs in the economy. That's where you could get that stock market conversation. Infrastructure, immigration, trade, and national security will be some of the pillars thematically of the speech that the president gives tonight.
And the big story today that triggered that healthcare sell-off was the Amazon Berkshire JP Morgan partnership. Wolf, you have a little more background on how this all came together?
Yeah, exactly. So the three big CEOs in terms of Diamond, Buffett, and Bezos, they'd always been close. They'd always chatted a lot. In fact, Diamond very nearly joined Amazon. I confirmed today when he left Citi as number 2 to Bezos. Of course, he went on and instead joined Bank One and then reverse merged into JP Morgan. And the three of them had always chatted in the past about how much they have to spend on healthcare and how poor the service is to their employees. That conversation increased at speed about a year ago when Ted Combs of Berkshire Hathaway joined the JP Morgan board. The three of them then sort of had an insider, as it were, that could really move this forward. And in the last 2 or 3 months, things moved more clearly forward, where they decided to form a separate company to all share their healthcare information with that company, which would have the information on its own. It would be ring-fenced within that. The reason they've released it today without very clear details is because they were going to have to start the search for a new CEO, and they thought it might leak if they didn't release it now. And also then in terms of what this really is for these companies, more of an aim to reduce costs than to try and blow apart the healthcare industry. For example, JP Morgan spent around $1.25 billion on US medical healthcare benefits. They feel with this new partnership, they can definitely improve the service their employees get and probably reduce that cost by 20% or more. Welcome back to the closing bell. Just a few minutes to go until the close. We're looking at about a 320-point decline for the Dow. That's 1.2% of the lows of the day. We were down 400 points, 0.9% decline for the S&P. If we look at the sectors now, healthcare the worst, clearly affected, of course, heavily by that deal between Berkshire Hathaway, Amazon, and JP Morgan. The sector's down nearly 2%. Energy, the other big mover, also down nearly 2%. That's because oil prices are slipping.
I call upon all of us to set aside our differences, to seek out common ground, and to summon the unity we need to deliver for the people. This is really the key. These are the people we were elected to serve.
Let's get more reaction to the president's speech. Joining me now, Tony Fratto, founding partner at Hamilton Place Strategies, former White House deputy press secretary and a CNBC contributor. Also with me, Ben Wife, chief economic correspondent at Politico, host of the Politico Money podcast and a CNBC contributor. And we're also joined by CNBC editor-at-large John Harwood. Gents, good morning to you all. Don't know where to start, but I think I'm going to start with you, Ben, in terms of the comments we did get about the stock market and the economy. Clearly, no nod to the pullback of the last couple of days, but in general, he did have strong grounds to sort of celebrate and celebrate the economic and stock market strength, and he did so.
Sure. I mean, he's obviously had a very strong stock market run in his first year in office. A lot of presidents wouldn't tout the stock market for fear that it'll eventually go down, but Trump has thrown that by the wayside. And on the economic numbers, talked about the low unemployment rate among African Americans. Well, remember that on the campaign trail, he called the jobless rate fake. Now he believes it's real. And a lot of these trends, both in unemployment among all people and African Americans, that trend began under President Barack Obama in 2010, 2011.
John, clearly a strong economy is something that all people want to see, whether it's down to the president or not. But what about the other topics? Which were the most divisive and saw Republicans applauding, but Democrats very much doing the opposite?
Well, the most significant one, Wilf, was immigration. And there he was not optimistic. He painted a dark picture of the menace that immigrants pose to Americans. He talked in lurid terms about the murder of young people and directed the camera's attention to grieving family members who he said had been victimized by MS-13. Now, there is, of course, that reflects an aspect of American society and of what the country's dealing with and of the immigration debate itself. But it paints a picture of the effects of immigration on the country that I think it's not going to be conducive to making a deal with Democrats.
One person has been confirmed dead in that accident. The train that was carrying Republican lawmakers hit a dump truck. The person who died was on that dump truck. Another person on that truck was critically injured. The Washington Post reporting that Senator Jeff Flake of Arizona actually helped carry one of the injured into an ambulance along with other lawmakers. Now, we can also tell you that one member of Congress has been taken to the hospital. We don't know who it is or what that person's current status is. Other people who were on the train were treated for minor injuries. Now, as you mentioned, lawmakers are coming out here to West Virginia in the Allegheny Mountains for their winter policy retreat. This is supposed to be a moment for them to reflect and try to turn the president's State of the Union address into some sort of legislative reality, but now clearly marked by some tragedy.
Kelly, Facebook reported adjusted earnings per share of $2.21. Now, that beats estimates of $1.95 per share. Now, it's worth noting that there's a tax impact. Facebook reporting a 77-cent decrease per share in earnings per share due to the effect of the change in the tax law. Now, if you include that tax impact, the earnings per share comes in at $1.44. But if you exclude that, it's $2.21. So that is a beat excluding that tax impact. Now, if you look at revenue, Also, a significant beat. Revenues coming in at $12.97 billion versus estimates of $12.55 billion. Daily active users, 1.4 billion from December. That's up about 14% year over year.
We've lifted millions into prosperity and delivered millions into freedom. This is our legacy. This is our birthright. And this is the foundation on which we build our very glorious future.
So let's bring in John Harwood from Washington. John, to me, this was State of the Union unplugged.
It was, Tyler. And I tell you what was striking to me about the president, he seemed very relaxed, more so than I've seen him in many appearances talking to even Republican lawmakers. He was fluid. He was joking with lawmakers. He was calling them out by name, engaging in banter back and forth. And as Elon said, he didn't deal at all with this looming question of whether he's going to direct the release of this FBI memo about the FBI and the Justice Department that his own FBI director, Christopher Wray, says he shouldn't.
Amazon is out. Deirdre Bosa brings us those numbers. Deirdre?
Hey, Kelly, Q4 revenue coming in at $60.45 billion. Estimates were for $59.83 billion. So that is a beat in a quarter where analysts tend to overestimate what Amazon is able to do in sales. So this is a beat on the top line.
Let's get straight to Josh Lipton, who has more on Apple's results. Josh?
Kelly, Apple reporting EPS of $3.89. That is versus expectations of $3.86. Revenue up 13% to $88.3 billion. Kelly, that's versus expectations of $87.28 billion. Gross margins 38.4%. iPhone units, Kelly, 77.3 million. Remember, the street had modeled around 80 million. Average selling price, though, $796. The street had modeled $756. iPad units, 13 million. Macs, 5.1 million. Services up 18% to $8.5 billion. Other products, remember, that includes the watch, Kelly, $5.5 billion. The guide, Kelly, the March 2 revenue guide, Apple is guiding between 60 and 62 billion. Now, analysts had expected more like 65 billion. Gross margins, they say, between 38 and 38.5%. The street was at 38.9%. I did have the chance to speak briefly with Apple CEO Tim Cook about the quarter. I'll give you his take. He told me we sold over 77 million iPhones. iPhone 10, he said, was our most popular iPhone despite not beginning to ship until November. It was also the best-selling smartphone in the world last quarter, and so we could not be more pleased with the reception to it. The combination of 8, 8 Plus, and 10 set a new record for iPhones from a revenue point of view by far. I also did ask Tim Cook how he thinks about the iPhone 10. Is it a mainstream product, or with that price tag, more of a premium niche product? Cook telling me you don't become the top-selling smartphone in the world by being a niche product. We would like to be for everyone.
It is a Groundhog Day, and it looks like we're in for 6 more weeks of winter. He saw his shadow. It was raining here.
What drives me crazy is you're always going to see your shadow when you have all those TV lights on you. There's no way you can ever not see your shadow.
Punxsutawney Phil. He saw his shadow. Saw his shadow. Don't drive angry. Don't drive angry. That has become a classic, that movie. The Pennsylvania Groundhog was wrong last year. But obviously that's not going to disqualify him from being on this show. He did see his shadow, but both February and March were warmer than average across the nation.
Is there a conversation that you have with either Tom or Belichick before the game? Like, what's going to happen on Sunday afternoon for you?
Well, Coach always gives me a pretty good overview before the game, and I've had a ritual for the whole time that Tommy's been playing where I see him right at his locker before the game, and we have a little chat, and I can usually look in his eyes and see how we're going to do.
You know?
Yes.
Okay, first of all, by the way, how's the hand? His hand?
His hand, given everything, his hand is pretty good.
And Hold on. So when you say you know, have you ever looked in his eyes and felt like, oh, this is going to be a tough one?
Yes.
I think earnings played a part here. You can't help but say, look what happened to Apple. Look what happened to some of the other big names. Look what happened to Chevron, Exxon. Exxon did not have particularly great numbers overall. We even had Clorox with some disappointments as well. Their revenues were on the light side. So we had some big companies here that were not outright disappointing, at least not as good as some people thought they were going to be. And so I think the earnings are the third part here for today. And this is the first time we've actually seen some disappointing. Remember, the earnings numbers have been going up.
Sure.
Generally.
Just going to say 684 points now, the decline. 684 is enough to be the third worst close ever. That's
right.
Significant. Yes, percentages are less than in the past.
That's
but
right.
2.6%.
What matters is the percentages, of course. But let's not poo-poo that. 680 points is a lot. Yeah. I think the big question now is this the start of some broader correction that's going on? I would start looking at some technicals like the 50-day moving average for some kind of bottom. That's just below 50 points below where we are now.
There is the bell, 670 or so not quite the third worst close ever, but we're still down more than 2.5% for the Dow, more than 2% for the S&P, nearly 2% for the Nasdaq. A big sell-off. Ringing the bell at the New York Stock Exchange was Anheuser-Busch InBev. Some Bud Light there needed for many people today, and winning it the Nasdaq was Gordon Point Acquisition Corporation. That's it.
Hey there, thanks for checking out CNBC on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all of the day's biggest stories. You can also click on any of the videos around me to watch the latest from CNBC. Thanks for watching.